Hey there! Ruining a pawn position can be extremely frustrating. That's why in today's video we're going to learn 3 key ideas to win pawn games. So let's start with the first one, which is to prevent your opponent's counterplay. And let's start with this position, which is a very spectacular one because it seems that white has an overwhelming advantage. White has a queen, 4 chest, a knight and 2 pawns. White's queen can easily attack black's pawns. So this seems like a very easy win. But if we take into account that black's position is desperate, black will try to push his pawns on the king side. So far black has only 1 passed pawn, but there might be an idea to go h6 and g5. And the king on h5, if it's not checkmated, it can support the pawns quite easily. So this position, if you analyze it with an engine, it will tell you that white wins no matter what. But in a practical game, this can get quite dangerous. In fact, white even lost the game. White went queen to e7, attacking h7, but after h6 and queen to f6, g5, white wasted 2 moves, or at least white allowed black to push his pawns, and after white took on g5, black took on g5, white finally collected a few pawns, and after f3 and queen takes, this position is actually winning for white, but it is quite easy to see that this position is becoming quite dangerous. So here black went king to g4, ready to advance the king and support the pawns. Now white went queen to e3, white still has a winning position, but now white could have tried going b4 straight away, pushing his pawns. And after queen to e3, black went king to g3, and after c4 we get a pawn race, which is not entirely clear, at least at first sight. Here black went king to g2, and after c5, f2, here white gave a check on e4, which was not a good idea, so here the game gets quite concrete. Even though white has a few winning options, the simplest is probably to go queen to c1, even though this allows black to promote. Now the idea is that after queen takes and king takes, c6, black is not in time to stop the pawn with the knight, and after g4, c7, g3, white queens, and there's this important point that the queen is attacking on h3, so black is in no time to go g2. So this requires some very concrete calculation that, as we see later, white could have avoided, or at least white could have gone for easier positions. So here after the move queen to e4, black went king to h2, just freeing the way for the g-pawn, and after queen to f3, here white probably missed this very nice move g4, sacrificing the pawn to deflect the queen from the f-file, and here white actually should have sensed the danger and taken this pawn on g4, because after black promotes and king to a2, white has pressure on a4, and without the a4 pawn, white has no risk, so this position should be fairly balanced. But it is hard to settle for a draw when you had such an overwhelming advantage. Here white went queen to a2, and after g3, white played the very natural move c6, after which black goes g2, and now black has a winning position amazingly. After queen to e5 and king to h1, black is ready to promote his pawns. The game lasted for a few moves. After c7, black promoted 2 queens in a row. After g1 queens, king to c2, f1 queens. Now here white went king to c3, there's no time to promote because black gets a very quick checkmate after queen to d1 and queen to b3, forcing the king to d2, and then queen to d1 is a checkmate. In any case, after king to c3, black gave a check, and then after king to b4, queen to b6, king takes. Now black gave another check, and here white resigned, not waiting for a checkmate after queen to b5 and queen takes. So white's sense of danger was not very good in this game. So now that we know that black is going to push the pawns no matter what because black is lost, white has a few ways to win, but I want to find the most practical way, which is to bring the king, ready to stop the pawns and even try to attack black's pieces. So after a move like king to c1, we're ready to bring the king. The queen on e1 is actually very well placed, protecting h4. And if black ever goes f3, this is actually quite bad because after queen to g3, we're attacking black's pieces. So now we're ready to bring the king, and once black's pawns on the king side are neutralized, we can easily collect the pawns on the queen side and win the game. Here black could have tried other ideas. For example, after king to g4, we can bring the king further. And if black goes f3, queen to e4 is actually quite strong. We attack the king and the pawn, and after knight to f4, king to e3, now we're just collecting black's pieces. Or black could have played h6 and g5 like in the game, but instead here white gets an active king and white doesn't waste time. So after king to d2 and g5, black can take and then go king to a2 and king to f1. White can easily stop those pawns with a king and a queen. For example, after g4, go king to f1. If black goes g3, white can easily block those pawns. And similarly after f3, we can go queen to e3, and now later on we're ready to push the pawns on the queen side by going b3 or b4. So this should be a fairly simple win for white. Another very important idea to win one games is to calculate long lines only when it is necessary. So here in this position, white has 3 extra pawns. It looks like a fairly easy win. On the other hand, black again is looking for counterplay. The queen is eyeing the rook on b1. There's an idea to take on f2. White is a very strong one master and white went for the move rook takes b5, which is quite shocking because the move rook to b2 simply neutralizes those threats. White simply defends the pawn f2, and now white is ready to consolidate after bishop to e3 or rook to e2. So this line doesn't require a lot of calculation, is fairly safe. With 3 extra pawns, white has all the winning chances. But instead white went rook takes b5, taking a pawn, but black will also get a very strong pawn on f2. So even this trade of pawns doesn't make a lot of sense. The pawn f2 was defending the king, the pawn on b5 was pretty useless. And now white is in no time to play defensive moves, like bishop to e3. Here there's an idea to go rook to f1, giving a checkmate. And after bishop to e3, rook to f1 and bishop to g1. Here black has the very strong rook takes g1, and after king takes, there's a discover attack on the queen. After bishop to h2, black will collect the queen on c6. But maybe after this trade, white was relying on the move queen to a8, giving a check, so now there's no tactic against the queen on c6. But relying on just 1 or 2 moves, it is extremely dangerous, and why should white take such risks when being 3 pawns ahead? So probably here white's idea was that after king to h7, now white can play bishop to e3. Now even in this line, after rook to f1 and bishop to g1, white's pieces are very passive. There might even be an idea to go bishop to g3 and bishop to f2, so this is also not clear. But after queen to a8, black has the retreating move. These moves are sometimes hard to see. Rook to f8, counter-attacking the queen, and now black has additional attacking ideas. Now that the f-pawn has been taken, if the queen moves, rook to f1 will give a checkmate. There are also ideas to go queen to g3 and queen to h2, but maybe white was relying on the move rook to g5, counter-attacking, but again, relying on just one move when you have a winning advantage is extremely risky and unnecessary. And here black played the very pretty move queen to e4, and in this position white resigned. The move queen to e4 seems to blunder the queen, otherwise black will go queen to e1 or rook to f1 giving a checkmate. But the point is that after queen takes, black would give a checkmate with the move rook to f1. That's why white resigned in a desperate position. And before I move on to the last key idea, if you want to seriously improve at chess, I have a free course that will provide you with a training plan for that, so feel free to check the link in the description. So the last key idea to avoid ruining winning positions is to be careful with simplifications, particularly when you reach pawn endings. So when you have a win advantage, it is very common to try to trade pieces. Very often that's a good idea if you can stop your opponent's counterplay. But with fewer and fewer pieces on the board, the ending can get extremely concrete, and even if you have a material advantage, that might not be enough to win the game. So let's start with this position where white has a clear advantage. White has an extra pawn and an extra exchange. So here white went for the pawn ending after taking on e5. Before we analyze that ending, I think that here white had a much easier alternative. First of all, black pieces are tied down. This bishop on e5 is pinned, so white can easily improve his position. A move that I like here is the move king to c2, because it requires pretty much no calculation. White simply improves his pieces. There might be an idea to push the b-pawn later on. Maybe first go rook to c5 and then push the b-pawn and the a-pawn as well. Black doesn't really have a clear counterplay in this position. Black has to be defending the bishop, and if black goes f3, this actually doesn't threaten anything. White might even improve the king further, because f2 is not a threat. So here white could even simply go rook to f1 and then collect the pawn. But even here, going for this pawn ending is a lot easier because after we take on e5, where we give a check, rook takes and rook takes, king takes. This is just a very simple calculation that after king to e2 we're stopping the pawn, and now these two pawns will promote. But instead here white decided to go for the pawn ending straight away, which as we'll see is winning, but white has to be a lot more careful. After rook takes, white took on e5, black took on e5, we got this pawn ending, where even though black's pawn is more advanced, white's idea is to stop the pawn after going king to c2. So here black goes f3, after king to d2, we are just in time to stop the pawn and even attack it. But here we see that black's king is more active than white's king, so here black tried the very interesting move king to e4. And in this position white tried king to d1 with the same idea to stop the pawn. Just want to mention that here white had one way to win the game, which is going b5. But again, if you depend on one move to win the game when you had such an advantage, you probably did something wrong. But the point is that after b5, if black goes f3, then king to d2 will stop the pawn. Or after king to f3, white is going to promote first, b6, king to g2, b7, f3, white promotes first, and after f7, this is going to be quite a trivial win. White can even give the queen for the pawn and then win with the a pawn. But instead, white went king to d1, and pawn endings are extremely concrete, so ideally when you go for them, you should calculate them to a draw, win, or to a loss. Because after the move king to d1, here black went king to f3, instead of f3, black went king to f3, which is a move that is very easy to miss after white took on e5 and went for those trades. So here after king to f3, the king is ready to support the advance of the pawn. White went b5. Here the move king to e1 is even losing for white because after king to g2, the pawn will give a check on f2 and then black will promote first and win the game. So white even has to be careful here. After b5, king to g2, both sides promote their pawns. And we got this queen ending where the pawn on a3 is not far advanced, so black managed to draw the game without too much trouble. So hope that you can use these ideas to stop ruining winning positions. These are practical tips to play when you have a winning advantage. You don't necessarily need to focus on the best moves in the position, but the moves that can allow you to win more easily. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.